So today, after a lot of listening, community conversations, and comparative research, I'm filing an ordinance to temporarily change the liquor license hours in Louisville. Instead of closing at 4 a.m., bars will temporarily, for a few months, be required to close at 2 a.m. under this ordinance. Our liquor license hours have always been an outlier. Cities like Atlanta, Austin, Cincinnati, Denver, Charlotte, Philadelphia, San Diego, San Francisco, Seattle, Nashville, Washington, D.C., all of those close earlier than 4 a.m. We're the only city in Kentucky that allows bars to stay open that late, and one of a handful across America. Today, I'm not looking to change that permanently. What I am looking to do is temporarily change these hours in response to record levels of violent crime, particularly gun violence, and some of the other issues these establishments are creating. This intervention is not rooted in moralizing or rooted in hypothesizing. It's rooted in data and public health principles. We know from research that liquor license hours impact public health and public safety outcomes. There have been numerous scientific studies on this issue. One study found that each 1 hour extension of liquor license hours led to an additional 16% increase in violent assaults. Another meta-analysis of multiple studies found statistically significant crime reduction and reduction in alcohol-related harms like drunk driving when liquor license hours were reduced by 2 hours or more. With our police force stretched thin and our city experiencing a rise in gun violence, research tells us that a small change in liquor license hours is an effective way to change the environment to proactively prevent unsafe situations from occurring. I think about this issue daily because the area I represent experiences these harms daily. The Highlands has the highest density of 4 a.m. bars that operate the full hours of their license and operate in a residential area. If you look at a map of these licenses, you will see a sea of red dots representing the licenses, surrounded by some of the most dense residential areas in our entire city. The 30,000 people that live near those red dots are impacted by these issues every day. As we see a spike in gun violence and other violent crime, it's my responsibility as the voice of this area and of the citizens that live there to do policies that I think will keep that community safe. And I stand here today in partnership with that community. The 3 neighborhood associations most impacted by the 4 a.m. bar licenses have passed resolutions asking me to introduce this ordinance. A grassroots petition was launched on Friday and has collected hundreds of signatures, over 100 signatures a day since then. I launched a survey for the community to give me feedback, and I have received hundreds of responses, and the majority of them favor this temporary measure. This measure is not anti-business, and I want to be clear about that. What we've seen in the Highlands is that a few businesses are making it more difficult for all the businesses there to thrive. This measure is intended to make it so that every business in the Highlands can succeed. To those who say we need more police and more enforcement, I don't disagree with that sentiment. Our police force is short 250 officers. Even with that, they have almost tripled the number of police officers in the Highlands and invested significant resources into our community. But they cannot be everywhere all the time. And this ordinance will change the environment and the landscape in which they are operating and allow them to invest resources in other areas. And I want to be clear that this issue affects everyone right now, not just those that live in the Highlands. Right now, every division across our city is losing officers on Fridays and Saturday nights because of the rise in violence in the Highlands. Every community is being impacted. I also want to be clear that it is not every 4 a.m. establishment that is a problem. We have many wonderful late-night bars in the Highlands, and I look forward to them being able to operate their full hours once the situation is better under control. But right now, we have a few bad actors who don't follow the rules and they put profit over people's safety, that are affecting everyone and causing issues that make it difficult for all small businesses to succeed. In fact, many establishments in the Highlands that have 4 a.m. licenses are not operating the full hours of those licenses because of the issues created by those bad actors. And that, folks, is not fair. This is a small temporary measure to keep our community safe. I understand it may impact some small businesses in the short run, but I believe the impact will be minimal and short-lived. I look forward to continued conversations about how to improve this ordinance as it moves forward. And today, I'm filing this ordinance because it's important to prioritize the health, well-being, and safety of everyone in our community. With that, I'm honored to introduce Mayor Fisher, who's going to share some of his thoughts about this proposed measure.
Good afternoon or good morning, everybody. It's great to be with you. Councilwoman, I really applaud you for your fantastic leadership to take this effort here today, so good job to you. Now, one of the things that's become clear over the past several years is that any of the challenges that the city faces, that there is no one simple solution to resolve them. It often requires a multi-pronged approach, and that's the approach that you saw our team announced just this last week when we announced a pilot safe outdoor space initiative. That's just one step amongst a 4-phase approach to take on homelessness in our community. Today's announcement is similar in that it is one step amongst many to curb the increase in gun-related crime in our city. And as the councilwoman said, Louisville, along with cities across the United States, is seeing a rise in homicides and other violent crimes. And we have all learned there is no one simple solution to this challenge. We can't arrest our way out of it, which is why we take a whole-of-city government approach to solving these issues. Enforcement certainly is part of that. And LMPD Chief Erica Shields and I are pleased with the tentative agreements with the Fraternal Order of Police announced just this past Friday, which includes police reform to build community trust, as well as much-needed salary increases to make LMPD's compensation competitive with other cities' departments so we can recruit and retain the best people. Our past budget that we just passed on July 1st also includes numerous safety investments. Our group violence intervention initiative you all are very familiar with, where we're identifying those most at risk of being either victims or committing violent crime and getting them into a productive situation. We've also increased our budget for a reimage program, which is proven to help kids that have been involved in the justice system get their GED, get a job, have a mentor. Over 85% success with that. $600,000 for a new reconciliation program, and it goes on and on. All in all, we quadrupled our budget for violence prevention, and many agencies, including the Office for Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods, are now hard at work on that mission. And the ordinance proposed by Councilwoman Chambers Armstrong, temporarily rolling back hours for alcohol sales, is, I believe, another tool in our violence prevention toolbox. As Chief Shields and many bar and restaurant workers who've had to deal with unruly patrons will attest, not much good happens after 2 a.m. among folks who are out late and often over drinking. And we understand that this may be difficult for some establishments that are still feeling the impact of the pandemic on their bottom line, and that's why we're going to have this, hopefully when the council passes it, hopefully they'll pass it, as a temporary measure so we can evaluate how this impacts both business, but certainly safety is first and foremost for the community. The bottom line is this: we need to take a look at every avenue that we can to curb the violent crime we're seeing in our city, and particularly in the early hours of the morning. And while establishments with a 4 a.m. extended license are scattered throughout the city, most of them are concentrated in 2 spots, downtown and along Bardstown Road. Both of those areas are critical entertainment and commercial corridors for residents and visitors, and we're committed to making sure the conditions are in place for them to thrive. Now, in June, when we think about downtown, in June, the Downtown Revitalization Team presented an action plan to ensure downtown is vibrant, clean, safe, equitable, and inclusive. And throughout the summer, Louisville Downtown Partnership, Louisville Metro, and partners have been working to implement that. Here's a few actions: cleaning up downtown with Brightside cleanup events in both downtown and in edge neighborhoods, the addition of more business improvement district ambassadors who provide safety, hospitality, and environmental maintenance services, and investments in infrastructure improvements, including sidewalk repairs and streetlight replacement, just to name a few. And now, just in the last week, we also announced a couple of investments along Bardstown Road, one of our city's most iconic corridors. The Kentucky Transportation Cabinet will invest $1 million to improve pedestrian safety and ensure efficient traffic flow along Bardstown Road following the Bardstown-Baxter Safety Study. This investment will make traveling along the corridor safer, whether you're in a car or on bike or on foot. In addition to that, we announced $1 million in American Rescue Plan funds awarded to Block by Block, which runs a hospitality, clean, and safety ambassador program in order for the company to expand their services beyond the central business district and into other commercial areas. And Block by Block began its assessment of the commercial areas today, and Bardstown Road will be one of the areas where ambassadors will greet, clean, and patrol. These ambassadors clean sidewalks, remove debris, and communicate with businesses, visitors, shoppers, workers, and residents. And we see that their presence also serves as a deterrent for unwanted activity, and they communicate with our public service agencies. In addition to these two investments, LMPD has increased its patrols along Bardstown Road after 10 p.m. on weekends in response to the increase in criminal activity that we're seeing. So you can see this is a four-prong approach to Bardstown Road that we have right now when you add in the Councilwoman's proposed ordinance. And we know that downtown, Bardstown Road, these are some of our iconic areas of the city. They have to be successful, and we're committed to making that happen. By rolling back the hours for alcohol sales and expanding the ambassador program, we hope to provide some relief to our LMPD officers, allowing them to focus more on investigating and stopping violent crime in our city. This will also help our ABC officers focus more of their attention on any establishments that are creating problems for our neighbors. So when we think about the public needs, safety needs in our city, there are many drivers. Bringing the hours of alcohol sales more in line with other major cities is just one more step that we can take. So we're looking forward to seeing the results, and then we'll evaluate and go from there. So thank you all for being here today, and now I would like to ask Chief Erica Shields to share her thoughts with us. Chief?
I just would like to say thank you to Councilwoman Armstrong for putting this legislation forward, and I really hope that her colleagues will take the time to read it, digest it, and support it. It's so easy to come to the table and just complain and to identify the problem that most of us already have identified as well. She's put forward a solution, and she's encapsulated it as a temporary solution so that we can assess it and see how well it works. But it's a solution. And the reality of it is we are so strapped for manpower that the added 2 hours may not sound like much, but it is when you have multiple incidents arise. And what the space that we have found ourselves in is we have had to pull from, on Friday and Saturdays, from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. from all of the divisions in the city and county to staff this one area because of the violence that's there. Will this be a cure-all? No, there is not, to the mayor's point, going to be one simple solution, but we have to try to do some things differently, and that's what this represents. And I really appreciate you stepping forward because I understand that legislation such as this is not going to be popular, but most of the time change in leadership isn't popular. So I just would like to say thank you, Councilwoman, and I appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
Okay, we're happy to take any questions.
Councilwoman, if what you say is true and this works so well, why is it only temporary?
So the question was, if this works so well, why is it only temporary? I believe that good data makes for good policy. I will tell you this was not, whenever I started seeing that there was a rise in violence in the Highlands, where my mind went to first. But the more I read and the more that I researched and the more that I looked into the public health and the public safety literature, I found very strong, compelling data about the efficacy of this as an intervention. I believe that this is something that will take community support and community buy-in. And I believe that we need to see if it works, quite frankly. And I know some people will say 4 a.m. bars have operated in the past without causing, issues. Can we go back there? And, my thought is if we can use this as a measure to help address the rise in gun violence that we're seeing, then we can have a conversation as a community about, if we want to return to the full hours. And I think a lot of people would favor that, quite frankly. But I believe good data makes for good policy, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the data shows us.
Can you talk to some bars who come out in support of it? Can you elaborate on your discussions with those bars?
So there are going to be several bars that will come and testify at committee. Still working out specifically what those are. What I can tell you is there are a lot of bars in the Highlands right now that have made the decision to close at 3 a.m. or 2 a.m. because of the issues that are being created. O'Shea's is one such restaurant. I believe Gerstl's has come out and sort of said that they've been closing early. Play Nightclub has been closing at 3 a.m. because of these issues. And what these bar owners say is that they're making the decision, even though they have the right to stay open to 4 a.m., that they don't want any part of what is happening in their commercial areas after 2 a.m., after 3 a.m. And so in my mind, when we're letting bad actors create a situation where the playing field is unlevel, that's not fair, and that's something that we need to address. And so I think this levels the playing field for everyone. It allows us to give LMPD a little relief and some capacity, and it lets us make sure that we're not letting bad actors create problems for everyone else in the neighborhood. And did I see Council President David James in the back? No? Okay. I thought I saw him duck in for a second. But yeah, thank you for the question.
Councilwoman, as it relates to the bad actors, why not just try to take an individual approach with them and do more holistic approach?
I wish that state law gave me better tools to address this situation. I wish that state law gave me the ability to more strongly go after liquor licenses just of bad actor establishments. State law does not allow us the local authority to do that. Speaking for myself, I hope that Frankfurt reconsiders that, because I think what we've seen is that our liquor license laws have their biggest impact at a local level, at sort of that neighborhood level. And I personally would like better tools to be able to address this. I think also when we think about it from a system and citywide level, I do think that one of the significant benefits of this legislation is that it does relieve the pressure that's on LMPD. And so that is something that, if we sort of close everyone at the same time, if we make it so that the rules of the playing field are that at 2 a.m. the liquor license hours end, that better leads to more capacity and sort of better takes the burden off of our ABC officers and off of our LMPD officers.
Councilwoman, is there a concern that this is not necessarily an issue of what's happening in the bars, but what's happening outside after people leave? And, how do you balance that with the business needs of the establishment?
Yeah, so I think that what we're seeing is some of these bad actor bars, quite frankly, are inviting in entertainment that they know is going to bring a sort of group violence affiliated crowd. They're not taking basic safety steps like screening people for guns, which they should be doing under state law. We're seeing a lot of bars sort of put profit over safety and not take the steps that they should be taking to make sure that they're ensuring a safe environment for their patrons. Of course, that also spills out onto the streets. Of course, that also leads to these situations where there's an atmosphere on the street that is causing some of these violent incidents to occur. So it's not that every single gun violent incident is happening inside one of these establishments, but the way that these bars are operating, and quite frankly, the fact that LMPD is stretched so thin as a result of having to respond to some of these incidents, really is creating a situation that's unsafe for the community.
Now, a lot of the cities that you talked about are also experiencing increases in homicides, and they still have this ordinance in place. We're trying to come in line with a lot of those cities. If they're still experiencing an increase in homicides, why would this work in the first place?
So what we see is most cities don't have 4 a.m. hours. What we see is that most cities, I'm looking at some that we call ourselves we like to think of as our peer cities like Nashville, Charlotte, Denver, Cincinnati, San Francisco, San Diego, Austin, Atlanta, all of those closed their bars earlier. And so whenever we look at the data from places that change their liquor license hours, we see that it leads to a reduction in violent crime. These are correlation studies. They're not sort of randomized control studies, so we don't know the exact mechanism for how it works, but what we do know is that all the studies tell us that it works. And so I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing similarly strong data out of Louisville. Thank you.
Mayor, I've got one question, not related to this ordinance, but now that the Pfizer vaccine has full FDA approval, will you consider a mandate for Metro employees for vaccination?
That's a great question. We were waiting for the FDA approval to consider what next steps are. As you know, we've required masking everywhere. We're seeing how we're in compliance with that. We know by department what our vaccination rates are as well. Some people have been holding off on getting the vaccine because of FDA approval, so now that's going to be the next step to see how many people really step up and do that. As a result of that, we'll evaluate that and then make a decision from there. All right, thank you all for coming out again, Councilwoman. Great leadership.